Imagine a country that was poorer than many African nations after a brutal war. A country with almost no natural resources, a country split in half, surrounded by giants, threatened by a nuclear neighbor, and forced to rebuild from ruins. And yet today, this same country sells the world phones, ships, cars, memory chips, beauty products, music, movies, dramas, video games, and culture. This is South Korea, a country that went from destroyed villages and foreign aid to Samsung, Hyundai, LG, K-pop, Netflix hits, AI chips, beauty brands, shipyards, skyscrapers, and one of the most intense work cultures on Earth. South Korea is not a giant country. It is smaller than the state of Kentucky. It has no huge oil fields. It does not control a global reserve currency. It does not have unlimited land, but South Korea built something else, a national machine. A system designed to take pressure, discipline, fear, ambition, education, exports, and turn all of it into global influence, and that is why this country matters. Because South Korea is not just a country that became rich, it is a country that industrialized like it was running from death. To understand South Korea, you have to begin with the disaster after the Korean War. The country was devastated. Cities were destroyed, factories were gone. Families were separated. Millions were displaced. The country was poor, unstable, and dependent on foreign aid. North Korea actually started with more heavy industry than the South at that moment. If you had to guess which Korea would become an economic powerhouse, many people would not have picked the South. South Korea had people, but it did not have much else. And that became the foundation of its strategy. If you have no oil, your people become the resource. If you have no giant domestic market, you export. If you are surrounded by danger, you move fast. If you are poor, you cannot afford to be average. That is the Korean story. Survival became policy. Education became obsession. Exports became religion. And speed became national identity. In the 1960s, South Korea began building an export-driven economy. The idea was simple but brutal. Make things the world wants, sell them abroad, bring money home, use that money to build bigger industries. Repeat. At first, South Korea was not making luxury electronics or world-class cars. It was making simple goods. Textiles, wigs, shoes. Low-cost products, cheap manufacturing, but the goal was never to stay there. The goal was to climb. From textiles to steel. From steel to ships, from ships to cars, from cars to electronics, from electronics to semiconductors, from semiconductors to AI infrastructure. This is the staircase South Korea built, and the government did not simply wait for the free market to figure it out. The state pushed companies hard. It chose strategic industries. It supported exporters. It pressured firms to perform. It gave credit, protection, and help, but expected results. If a company succeeded abroad, it got more support. If it failed, it could lose favor. This created the system of chaebols, massive family-controlled business groups like Samsung, Hyundai, LG, SK, and Lot. These companies became more than companies. They became national weapons. Samsung was not just making electronics. Hyundai was not just making cars. SK was not just making chips. LG was not just making appliances. They were part of South Korea's race to survive and catch up. And this is what makes South Korea different from many countries. It did not just grow. It mobilized. Almost like an economy at war. The first huge symbol of this ambition was steel. Steel is not glamorous, but steel is the skeleton of industrial power. You need it for ships, cars, buildings, machines, factories, bridges, and infrastructure. South Korea built POSCO, one of the world's major steel producers. That gave the country the base for heavier industry. Then came shipbuilding. This is where South Korea became almost unbelievable. Imagine telling a poor country with little industrial experience, "You're going to become one of the world's best shipbuilders, not small boats, huge tankers, container ships, LNG carriers, offshore platforms, floating factories, ships so complex that a delay in one component can disrupt billions of dollars in global energy and trade." And South Korea did it. Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, Hanwha Ocean, these names became central to global shipbuilding. South Korea learned how to build some of the most complex vessels on Earth, and this matters because ships are the hidden infrastructure of globalization. Most people do not think about ships, but everything around them moved by sea. The phone, the clothes, the furniture, the car parts, the food ingredients, the oil, the gas. Globalization floats, and South Korea helped build the things it floats on. That is one layer of Korean power. Then came cars. For a long time, Korean cars were treated like cheap alternatives. Not serious, not premium, not world class. But South Korea kept improving. Hyundai and Kia moved from low-cost cars to reliable, well-designed, globally competitive vehicles. They learned from Japan, competed with Europe, entered America, and slowly changed their image. Today, Korean cars are everywhere. Hyundai and Kia sell SUVs, sedans, hybrids, electric vehicles, and luxury models through Genesis. They do not just represent transportation. They represent the Korean pattern: start underestimated, improve relentlessly, enter the global market, compete on price. Then compete on quality, then compete on design, then become normal in the lives of millions of people. That is how countries climb. Not through one miracle, through thousands of improvements. But the real heart of South Korea's modern power is technology, and especially memory chips. When people talk about semiconductors, they often mention Taiwan because of TSMC and advanced chip manufacturing. But South Korea is one of the most important countries in memory, DRAM, NAND flash, high bandwidth memory. These are not just technical words, they are the storage and memory systems behind modern computing. Phones need memory. Laptops need memory. Servers need memory. AI systems need high bandwidth memory. Data centers need storage. Gaming consoles need memory. Cars need chips. Cloud platforms need chips. The more digital the world becomes, the more important memory becomes, and South Korea has Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, two giants sitting at the center of the memory industry. This is especially important now because artificial intelligence is not only about clever software. AI is physical. It needs chips. It needs GPUs. It needs memory. It needs energy. It needs data centers. It needs cooling, and high-bandwidth memory has become one of the critical parts of the AI supply chain. That means South Korea is not just making electronics. It is helping power the AI race. When people talk about NVIDIA, they often focus on the GPU, but those GPUs also need advanced memory. And Korean companies are deeply involved in that world. This is the new Korean position, not always the loudest brand in the headline, but inside the machine that makes the headline possible. That is real power. Now, look at Samsung. Samsung is not just a phone company. It is one of the most important industrial organizations on Earth. Phones, memory, chips, displays, appliances, components, foundry business, consumer electronics. A Samsung part can be inside a product even when the product does not say Samsung on the outside. That is the difference between a brand and an ecosystem. Samsung is both. It sells products directly to consumers and it supplies components to other companies. That gives South Korea a strange influence over the global tech chain. The country is not only selling finished goods, it is selling the parts that other companies need to finish their goods. And that is the deeper pattern again. South Korea moved from poor manufacturing to strategic manufacturing, from cheap labor to advanced components, from copying to competing, from competing to shaping the market. But if this were only a story about factories, it would already be impressive. The strange part is that South Korea also turned culture into exports. This is the Hallyu wave. Korean pop culture did not become global by accident. It was built through talent training, production systems, media strategy, visual identity, and relentless export thinking. K-pop groups are not simply bands. They are entertainment products designed with terrifying precision, music, choreography, fashion, personality, social media, fan communities, documentaries, merchandise. World tour, language, strategy, everything is engineered. And it worked. BTS became a global phenomenon. Blackpink became a worldwide brand. Korean dramas became international hits. Parasite won major global awards. Squid Game became one of the most watched shows in Netflix history. Korean beauty brands spread across the world. Korean food became trendy. Korean fashion entered Western culture. Suddenly, South Korea was not only exporting phones and cars, it was exporting taste. That is very different. When a country exports a phone, it gets money. When a country exports culture, it gets emotional influence. People start learning the language. They visit the country. They buy the cosmetics. They wear the fashion. They eat the food. They follow celebrities. They build identity around the culture. That is soft power, and South Korea became one of the best soft power machines in the world. The same country that was once associated with war and poverty became associated with style, beauty, music, technology, and ambition. That is not a small transformation. That is a complete rebranding of a nation. But South Korea's rise also has a dark side. The pressure that built the country did not disappear. It moved into everyday life. Korean education is famously intense. Students compete brutally. Families spend heavily on private tutoring. Careers are competitive. Corporate culture can be exhausting. Housing in Seoul is expensive. The birth rate is extremely low. Young people often feel trapped between high expectations and limited freedom. This is the cost of the machine. South Korea became rich by moving fast, working hard, studying hard, and competing constantly. But a society cannot run on pressure forever without consequences. The same discipline that created the miracle can also create burnout. The same education obsession that created skilled workers can also make childhood feel like a race. The same export machine that built national wealth can leave people feeling like they exist to serve the machine. This is why South Korea is fascinating. It is both a success story and a warning. It shows what a country can achieve with focus, discipline, and strategy, but it also shows what happens when competition becomes a lifestyle. And then there is the security problem. South Korea's success exists under constant tension. North Korea is right there. A heavily militarized border sits just north of Seoul, the capital of one of the richest economies in Asia, is located dangerously close to one of the most militarized regions on Earth. This makes South Korea's rise even more unusual. Many countries say they cannot develop because of security pressure. South Korea developed while living with permanent security pressure. It built skyscrapers, factories, ports, entertainment companies, chip plants, and global brands while the threat never fully disappeared. That creates a national psychology. Urgency, preparedness, discipline, the feeling that nothing is guaranteed, and maybe that is one reason South Korea moves the way it does. Fast, competitive, sometimes anxious, always trying to stay ahead because falling behind is not just an economic fear. It feels existential. Now compare South Korea with countries that had more resources. Many resource-rich countries stayed dependent on commodities. South Korea had almost nothing. So it had to build capability. And capability is better than luck. Oil can run out. Cheap labor can move elsewhere, but skills, systems, brands, factories, research, logistics, and culture can compound. That is what South Korea built. A compound machine. Samsung makes chips and phones. Hyundai makes cars and ships. SK makes memory and energy systems. LG makes displays, batteries, electronics, and appliances. Korean entertainment sells music, stories, fashion, and beauty. Korean shipyards build vessels for global trade. Korean automakers sell mobility. Korean chip makers feed AI and computing layer after layer. This is why South Korea punches so far above its size. It is not dependent on one thing. It has several export engines running at once. Technology, cars, ships, culture, beauty, food, gaming, displays, batteries, and each one reinforces the national image. A teenager discovers Korea through K-pop. Then watches Korean dramas, then buys Korean skincare, then sees Samsung phones, then notices Hyundai cars, then eats Korean food, then wants to visit Seoul. This is how influence spreads, not through one product, through an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is now global. But the future of South Korea is not guaranteed. China is competing hard. Taiwan dominates advanced foundry manufacturing. Japan still controls important materials and equipment. America is bringing chip production back. Europe wants industrial security. AI is changing. Demand, birth rates are falling. Young Koreans are tired. The old growth model is under pressure, so South Korea now faces its next challenge. It can no longer only be the country that catches up, it has to become the country that leads. That is much harder. Catching up gives you a target. Leading means you have to invent the target. And this is where South Korea's next chapter will be decided. Can it lead in AI memory? Can it lead in batteries? Can it lead in electric vehicles? Can it lead in culture without burning out its artists? Can it reform work culture without losing competitiveness? Can it stay innovative while its population shrinks? Can it keep young people hopeful? That is the real question, because the Korean miracle was not magic. It was pressure turned into productivity. But the future may require something more: balanced, creativity, freedom, quality of life, risk-taking, less fear, more imagination. South Korea already proved it can work harder than almost anyone. Now it has to prove it can create better than almost anyone. And maybe that is already happening. Korean directors are winning. Globally, Korean designers are influencing fashion. Korean engineers are powering AI. Korean companies are entering premium markets. Korean brands are no longer treated as cheap copies. They're treated as global leaders. That is the transformation. From poor country to factory to exporter to brand to culture machine to technology backbone, South Korea became one of the few countries that can sell both hardware and emotion. A chip for your server, a car for your family, a phone for your pocket, a song for your playlist, a drama for your weekend, a beauty product for your bathroom, a ship for your supply chain. That is extremely rare. Most countries are good at one layer. South Korea built several, and that is why its rise matters. It shows that a country does not need massive natural resources to become powerful. It needs strategy. It needs institutions. It needs education. It needs companies that can scale. It needs a culture that can export itself. It needs the ability to move from simple work to advanced work. And it needs the discipline to keep climbing. So when people ask how South Korea became powerful, the answer is not just Samsung, not just K-pop, not just Hyundai, not just chips, not just American support, not just government planning. It is. The combination, a country under pressure built an economic machine. That machine produced companies, those companies produced exports, those exports produced wealth, that wealth produced culture. That culture produced influence, and now the world uses Korean products, watches Korean stories, listens to Korean music, drives Korean cars, and depends on Korean chips, that is South Korea. A country that started with almost nothing. A country that rebuilt from war. A country that turned pressure into speed, and a country that now sells the modern world pieces of its own future.